I'm the daughter, and this is my series for ages 8 and up. This is the next episode in my series, and our first book is The Witches. We're currently in chapter 2, and it's called My Grandmother. I myself had 2 separate encounters with witches before I was 8 years old. From the first, I escaped unharmed, but on the second occasion, I was not so lucky. Things happened to me that will probably make you scream when you read about them. That can't be helped. The truth must be told. The fact that I am still here and able to speak to you, however particular I may look, is due entirely to my wonderful grandmother. My wonderful grandmother was Norway. The Norwegians knows all about witches. For Norway, with its black forests and icy mountains, is where the first witches came from. My father and my mother were also Norwegians. But because my father had a business in England, I had been born there and had lived there and had started going to English school twice a year at Christmas. And in the summer, we went back to Norway to visit my grandmother. This old lady, as far as I could gather, was just about the only surviving relative we had on the other side of our family. She was my mother's mother, and I absolutely adored her. When she and I were together, we spoke in Norway or in English. It didn't matter which. We equally fluent in both languages, and I have to admit that I felt closer to her than my mother. Soon after my 7th birthday, my parents took me, as usual, to spend Christmas with my grandma in Norway. And it was over there while my father and mother and I were driving in icy weather just north of Oslo that our car had skidded off the road and went tumbling down a rocky ravine. My parents were killed. I was firmly strapped into the back seat and received only a cut on my forehead. I won't go into the horrors of that terrible afternoon. I still get the shivers when I think about it. I finished up, of course, back in my grandmother's house, with her arms around me tight, both of us crying the whole night. What are we going to do now? I asked her through the tears. You'll stay here with me, she said, and I will look after you. Aren't I going back to England? No, she said. I could never do that. Heaven shall take my soul, but Norway shall keep my bones. The very next day, in order that we might both try to forget our great sadness, my grandmother started telling me stories. She was a wonderful storyteller, and I enthralled by everything she told me. But I didn't really become excited until she got to the subject of witches. She was apparently a great expert on these creatures, and she made it very clear that her witch stories, unlike most of the others, were not imaginary tales. They were all true. They were all gospel truth. They were history. Everything she was telling me about witches had actually happened. You just gotta hold on one sec. I just have to do something real quick. Now, where was I? Had actually happened, and I had better believed it. What was worse, that was far, far worse was that witches were still with us. They were all around us, and I had better believed that too. Are you really being truthful, Grandmama? Really and truthfully truthful. My darling, she said, you won't last long in this world if you don't know how to spot a witch when you see one. But my grandma told me that witches look like ordinary women. Grandma, how can I spot them? You must listen to me. My grandmother said, you must remember everything I tell you. After that, all you could do is cross your heart and pray to heaven and hope for the best. We were in the big living room of her house in Oslo, and I was ready for bed. The curtains were never drawn at that house, and though the windows, I could see huge snowflakes falling slowly on to outside. The world was black as tar. My grandmother was tremendously old and wrinkled with a massive wide body, which was smoother and gray lace. She sat there majestic in her armchair, filling every inch of it. Not even a mouse could squeeze in to sit beside her. I myself, just 7 years old, was crouched on the floor, at her feet, wearing pajamas, dressing gown, and slippers. You swear you aren't pulling my leg? I kept saying to her. You swear you aren't just pretending? Listen, she said. I've known no less than 5 children who simply vanished off the face of this earth, never to be seen again. The witches took them. I still think you're just trying to frighten me, I said. Trying to make sure you don't go the same way, she said. I love you. I want you to stay with me. Tell me about the children who disappeared, I said. My grandmother was the only grandmother I had ever met. We smoked cigars. She lit one now, a long black cigar that smelled of burning rubber. The first child I knew who disappeared. She said, was called Reagan Hansen. Reagan was about 8 at the time, and she was playing with her little sister in the lawn. Her mother came outside, who was breaking bread in the kitchen, came outside for a breath of air. Where's Regal? She asked. She went away with the tall lady, the little sister said. What tall lady? The mother said. The tall lady in white gloves, the little sister said. She took Regal by the hand, led her away. No one, my grandmother said, ever saw Regal again. They didn't search for her? I asked. They searched for miles around. Everyone in the town helped, but they never found her. What happened to the other 4 children, I asked. They vanished, just like Grandma did. How, Grandmama? How did they vanish? In Kais, a strange lady was seen outside the house just before it happened. But how did they vanish, I asked. The second one was particular. My grandmother said there was a family called Christians. They lived up on Hook Room, and they had seen an old oil painting in the living room, which they were very proud of. The painting showed some ducks in the yard outside a farmhouse. There were no people in the painting, just a flock of ducks on a grassy farm and a farmhouse in the back. large painting and rather pretty. Well, one day, the Dahl savage came home from school eating an apple. She said, "A nice lady had given it to her in the street." The next morning, she wasn't in her bed. Her parents searched everywhere, but they could not find her. Then, all of a sudden, her father shouted, "There she is! That sorry field of ducks!" He pointed at the oil painting. Sure enough, Solfege was in it. She was standing in the farmyard in the act of throwing bread to the ducks out of a basket. Her father rushed up to the painting and touched her, but that didn't help. She was simply a part of the painting, just a picture painted on the canvas. Did you ever see that painting, Grandma? With a little girl in it? Many times, my grandma said. And the particular thing was that she kept changing her position in the picture. One day, she would actually be inside the farmhouse. You would see her looking out the window. Another day, she'd be far over to the left with a duck in her arms. "Mama, did you see the picture? Did you see her moving in the picture, Grandma?" Nobody did. Whether she was outside feeding the ducks or inside looking out the window, she was always motionless. Just a figure painted in words. It was very odd. My grandmother said it's very odd indeed. That was the most odd thing that was over the years. What was most odd, that's all thing? She kept growing older in the picture. In 10 years, the small girl had become a young woman. In 30 years, she was middle-aged. And once 54 years, and after it all happened, she disappeared from the picture all along. You think she died, I said. Who knows, my grandmother said. Some very mysterious things go on in the world of witches. That's two you've told me about, I said. What happened to the third one? The third one was little Bridget Citizen. My grandmother said she was across the road from us. One day she started growing feathers in her whole body. With her mother, she had turned into a large wood chicken. Her parents kept her in a pen in the garden. She even laid eggs. "What color eggs?" I said. "Brown ones," my grandma said. Biggest eggs I've ever seen in my life. Her mother made omelets out of one of them. Delicious they were. I gazed up at my mother, who sat there like some ancient queen on her throne. Her eyes were misty gray, and they seemed to be looking at some things many miles away. The cigar was the only real thing about her at the moment, and the smoke clouds it made blowed around her head in big clouds. But the little girl who became a chicken didn't disappear, I said. "No, not Bridget. She lived off for many years under that brown egg. You said all of them disappeared." "I made a mistake," my grandma said. "I'm getting old. I can't remember everything." "What happened to the fourth child?" I asked. "The fourth child was a boy named Harold." My grandmother said, "One morning his skin went all grayish-yellow, and as it became hard and crackly, like a shell of nut. By the evening, he had turned to stone." "Stone?" I said. "You mean real stone, Grandma?" She said, "I'll take you to see him if you like. They still have kept him in the house. He stands in the hall, a little stone statue. Visitors lean their umbrellas up against him. Although I was a very young man, I was not prepared to believe everything my grandmother told me. And yet, she convinced me that And yet she spoke with such calm precision, with such utter seriousness, and with never a smile on her face or a twinkle in her eye. That found myself beginning to wonder. Go on, Grandma, I said. You told me 3. There were 5 altogether. What happened to the last one? Would you like a puff from my cigar, she said. I'm only 7, Grandma. I don't care what age you are, she said. You'll never catch a cold if you smoke cigars. What about number 5, Grandma? Number 5, she said, chewing the end of her cigar, as though it was delicious. Asparagus. It was rather an interesting case. A 9-year-old boy called Leaf was summer holidaying with his family on the Fordwood, and the whole family was picnicking and swimming off some rocks on one of those little islands. One Leaf dived into the water with his father, who was watching him. He noticed that he stayed under for an unusually long time. When he came to the surface, he wasn't leafy anymore. What was he, Grandma? He was a horse. He wasn't. He couldn't have been. He was a lovely young horse, she said, as friendly as could be, Grandma. I said, yes, my darling. Did he really and truly turn into a puppies? Absolutely, she said. I knew his mother. Well, she told me all about it. She told me how Leafy, the puppies, stayed with them all that afternoon, giving his brothers and sisters ride on his back. And they had a wonderful time. He waved his flipper at them and swam away, never to be seen again. But Grandma, I said, how did they know a piece was actually Leffy? He talked to him, my grandma said. He was laughed and joked with them all the time. He was doing them right. But wasn't there a most tremendous fuss when this happened? I asked. Not much, Minnie, you said. You must remember that here in Norway, we are used to that sort of thing. There are witches everywhere. There's probably one living in our streets this very moment. It's time you went to bed. A witch couldn't come through my window in the night. Would she? I asked, quaking a little. No, my grandma said. A witch would never do silly things like climb up drain pipes or break into people's houses. You'll be quite safe in your bed. Come on, I'll tuck you in. And that is where we end off for this chapter. Hope you guys enjoy. Come for the next one. Bye!